I want to talk about the parable of the talents, where the master gave his 3 servants, one 5 talents, one 2 talents, and one 1 talent. If we do well with the gifts that God gives us and with the abilities that God gives us, He'll give us another. He'll take the talent that He's given to somebody who's not using it and give it to people that use it. My name is Randy Leyendecker, and I got saved at the age of 19. But sin and guilt caused me to backslide. And I was backslid for about 19 years. However, all those years I wanted to get back close to God and to Jesus. And I just didn't know how. I opened up a lumber yard I had a partner, and from the beginning we dedicated it to God. We would sell to missionaries and churches and Christian works our materials at cost. And so I guess the news got out. We had a reputation of doing that, and so more and more missionaries would come to the lumberyard to buy building materials to go into Mexico. And we had missionaries that would come and ask if they could use our phone. This was the days before cell phones were around. And I wasn't eavesdropping, but they would be talking on a phone right next to me. And all the missionaries, from no matter where they were, had the same logistical problems. They would have to call people and ask, well, where are you and where is Fred? And we don't know, and the bridge won't let us cross these materials. And some people stay at hotels, some people stay at churches, and other people stay at individuals' homes. And but all their problems were similar. And one year there was a group that needed a place to store their trailer with goods in it. They tried to cross it into Mexico, but the Mexican government refused them to enter with it. And so they called me up. They were from out of state, and they said, Randy, can we park this trailer here at the lumberyard? Because they didn't know who else to turn to. And I said, sure. My lumberyard isn't the most beautiful place. It's blessed, but it's not a beautiful place. And I told them, you know, you're not gonna retract from the beauty of the lumberyard by parking it here, so just bring it on and leave it here. One of the guys came a week later, and he says, Randy, where can we buy some land here? Because this unloading and reloading and stuff is a hassle. And I went into my business mode, which isn't always the most polite mode. It's more of a black and white. And so this guy asked me, and I'm thinking, he wants to buy land, and he's not from Laredo. He has no idea that land here is about $100,000 an acre. He probably thinks that he can get an acre of land for $5,000 or $10,000. And you know, so anyway, I get in my business mode, and I start pointing a finger at him, which is rude. But at the time, I didn't mean for it to be rude. I just meant, you know, to express myself. And I said, it's too bad you guys don't get together, like you missionaries, don't all get together and buy something in common to where you have a bigger warehouse, a more efficient place, bigger place where you can, and I'm telling him all these things that he should do with all these other missionaries, but a lot of them don't even know each other anyway. And anyway, so I'm kind of giving this guy a little bit of a harsh education. But the strange thing was that while I was talking to him, and I'd never had this happen to me before, it's like if I was hearing, why don't you do it? Referring to me. You live in Laredo, a focal point from the United States to Mexico. You know a lot of Christian missionaries and pastors. You speak English and Spanish. You're single. You don't have a wife and kids that would hinder you from doing this. You're the boss at your business. You don't have anybody telling you when you can and cannot leave. And this is what I was telling him. And there were a lot of reasons why I should do it. And remember, I was backslidden, and I missed Christianity. And I realized that God was calling me again. A little while later, my dad, I'm going back, my dad likes to fish. I always thought that it would be nice if we had our own little place, not a big place, but just a place where he could fish. So one Saturday I called a friend of mine who's a real estate agent and said, hey, let's go see if there's a place that's for sale that has a little fishing tank on it, fishing pond, and just something to do. We were just driving around. It was kind of an impoverished place. There were it's like a little shanty town, a lot of unfinished houses, and you could just tell that the poor people were living in the area. And then we came to this gate, and there was this big unfinished block building. It was more like a hotel than a house. And I stopped. I actually put my truck in park, and I looked at this piece of property, and it was more like I was gawking at it because it just didn't fit. It stuck out like a sore thumb amongst all this poverty. Somebody had invested a lot of money in this structure, this block walls. Didn't have a roof, didn't have windows, didn't have doors. And anyway, in my mind, and I hate to say this, in my mind, I thought to myself, what idiot would build something like this out here? If you're going to spend this much money building a house, they should build it in Regency or one of these higher end subdivisions here in Laredo, Texas. And then there was kind of like some columns to build a warehouse in the front. And I thought, and what idiot would build a warehouse in the front of the house? Most people would build a warehouse in the back of the house and stuff like that. Months later, I was looking in the want ads, and I'm kind of an opportunist. A lot of times I'll buy things that are a good deal, even if I don't need them. And so I'm always just kind of looking and seeing what's out there. And I came upon a little ad, and it said 20 acres for sale. Large, 9,000 square foot unfinished house. Large, unfinished swimming pool. Horse stalls, tack room. And all these things, and 20 acres, and I was thinking, the missionaries. And I called a real estate friend, and I said, hey, you got to take me and show this place to me, Las Penitas. And so, same guy. We drove out here, he pulls up to the gate, and I remembered that I had said, what idiot built this place? And I came to tears because I knew that God had built it. And he built it for this purpose, to help missionaries. And so anyway, all of a sudden I thought of a customer of mine. His name is Gustavo Garcia, and he's a Christian brother who was going to the Assembly of God, and I didn't really know him real personally, but nonetheless, I knew he was a good man, and he was easy to get along with, and I just thought of him. And I called him, and I said, hey, Tavo, his name's Gustavo, but his nickname's Tavo. I said, hey, Tavo, there's this place out here north of Laredo, and it's for sale, and I described it to him, and I said, it's $125,000, and I want to do this. I want to help the missionaries. I want to give them a place where they can congregate, where they can sleep together. They can wake up in the morning, have a prayer service and breakfast, and then they can go on their way. And he says, you know what, Randy? I've been thinking about doing something real similar lately. And he says, yes, I'll go into it with you. That night I go home and I call the phone number because I was kind of in a panic. I wanted to put some money down before somebody else were to buy it because it was so inexpensive. I was worried that I might lose it. And he says, yes. And I go, this is Randy Leyendecker. He says, hey, Randy. I said, I'm calling about the piece of property that you have in the newspaper? He says, yes, it's a big house, it's got a swimming pool and la, la, la. And I said, yes, I've been out there. And I go, have you sold it yet? He says, not yet. And here's the business mistake that I made. When he said it hadn't been sold yet, I said, I want it. and you don't tell a guy that. And then later try to negotiate. But then after he was kind of talking about it, I said, Neto, and I mean, I would have bought it at that one I would have bought it at the 125, but I said, is the price negotiable? After I told him I already wanted it. So he says, well, he goes, because I had told him what I wanted to do. And he says, if that's what you want to do with it, let me talk to my wife, because I don't think we would want to make a profit. So anyway, I said, okay, thanks. And the next day he called and he says, Randy, I talked to my wife and we have $100,000 in it. And if you'd like to buy it, we'll sell it to you for $100,000. God is good. So I got together with Tavo and I said, Tavo, who's your banker? And he goes, International Bank of Commerce. And I said, that's my banker. And I go, who's your loan officer? And he says, Eddie Farias. That's my loan officer. And he says, Eddie, Randy and I want to buy a piece of property and we want to borrow 100% of the note. We don't want to borrow 80%. And we want a low interest rate and we want to pay the interest rate only for and we'll renew it 6 months at a time. And most of the time when you go to the banker, you ask them what they can do for you, not tell them what you want. But anyway, Tavo told him what we wanted and the loan officer says, okay. So we got the agreement on the note just so easy that it's just God putting things into place. And that was how we began the Stepping Stone. Probably, I'm not sure, but maybe 20 years ago, close to 20 years ago. And God is good. It's come a long way. I was 53 and single, never been married, not once. And I met this girl, and you know, when you start dating somebody, you don't know anything about them at first. You begin to get to know them, and this girl who I was beginning to fall in love with, she starts telling me that when she was a young girl, at maybe the age of 6 or something like that, that her dad had walked out on her mother. The mother ended up being homeless because she couldn't make the payments because she had 4 children. And so they literally were on the streets in Miami. And my girlfriend at the time, it's my wife now, my wife was telling me that they would sleep in parks, they would sleep on park benches and in cars. And my wife would tell me, I just wanted somebody to be nice to us. She said the schools were not nice to them because they were dirty. The churches didn't give them shelter. And she said that one time her and her brother and sisters saw other kids with the Burger King cardboard crowns. And they told their mom, Mom, we want a Burger King crown. And so the mother walked them into a Burger King. The kids were always following the mom. They're like little ducklings, I guess. And so Jeannie's mother went into a Burger King with the 4 kids and told the manager, I'll wipe off the tables, I'll sweep, I'll mop, I'll throw the trash out. All I ask is that you give 1 hamburger for each of one of my kids and a Burger King crown for each of the kids. And that the manager told her, get out of here. And my wife's crying and I'm crying. And boy, I feel sorry for that man. I hope that he repents and I hope he comes to the Lord. But I can just imagine how angry God must be at people who have no pity. And I said, well, Jeannie, let's do this. Let's get in the pickup truck and let's go look for a single mom with kids. And we'll be the people that you were looking for. We'll be nice to them. We went out and we got some, we bought 2 hamburgers for each bag, the dollar hamburgers. We bought a Coke and we got some cans of peaches from the food bank that had the pop top to them, and we iced them down so they were cold. And we took out maybe about when we first got started, about 15 bags, and we went offering food to the homeless. And some of them, when we first started doing it, we'd say, "Would you like some food?" And they'd look at us with a question mark as, "What's the catch? Like, what do I have to give you for it?" And we said, "No, we're doing this for Jesus." And some of the adults, some of the men would cry because somebody's giving them a couple of $1 hamburgers. There was one time at the beginning that we gave a bag to a young man, and as I was driving off, I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw him look in his bag, and he smiled. It went from 16 bags to 30 bags, and we were doing this daily. And it got to where it was getting overwhelmingly expensive for us because each bag was worth about $2 or $3 in the gasoline. And as it is now, Bethany House probably gives us over 130 plates a day that we hand out. We had a couple of volunteers, friends helping us, and we realized that the homeless don't go to church mainly because they don't want to go into a fancy building where they're out of place. They smell, that kind of stuff. So we said, maybe we should have a little church service here at Jarvis Plaza. And none of us are ordained ministers or anything like that. We're just lay people, but we're men of God. And anyway, we said, why don't we have a service here? And so we actually got a couple of speakers on a stand, and we also cooked some food for them. And it started off with just a handful of people. We sit on the park benches, the people sit on the park benches, and we get volunteers to sing Christian songs. And anyway, it has grown. We've been doing that for what, John, about 5 years or 7 years, something like that. And it has grown to where now we feed. There's some people that show up when it's time to eat, not for the service. In fact, they'll actually stay across the street until we start feeding, and then they come over. But that's okay because they hear the word of God too. But I would say that sometimes we have 100 people thereabouts. And but that's another thing that the good Lord has allowed us to do. It started off with a stepping stone, and then we have the radio station and the little church in Ensenal, and the homeless ministry, and the church in the park, and I think it's the good Lord just giving us more talents, and hopefully He'll continue to do that, because we all should just have the desire to do as much as we can for God. One thing that I've always wanted here is, I don't know if you've seen the terrain back here, but it's got a little bit of a downward slant to it. And I've always wanted to build an amphitheater out here and have Christian concerts and Christian plays and invite the people of Laredo to come. And the other thing, I think a lot of Christian musicians, they would love just coming out here and jam outdoors if they had speakers and all that, just to go out down here and praise and give glory to God. It's a beautiful place. But that's one dream that I have.